Hello and welcome to another episode of HR Freelancers TV with me, Tracy Hopkins from the HR Consultancy Business School. Right, today what I want to talk to you about briefly is some of the early decisions that you need to make when you're getting started with your freelance HR consultancy business. You just are going to need to make a couple of decisions around how you want to work, what your business is going to be like. So I thought it would be useful to just run through a couple of the different options that are going to be open to you. So we're going to look at the different types of legal structures that you can choose between, and also a few of the different business models that are available to you, which you may not have given any thought at all to at this stage, because I know I certainly didn't. I just thought I'd go and have a look and see what sort of work was out there. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay, sorry, just getting my notes sorted out. So let's go and talk about that. So legal structure, you probably already know about this. So, but just in case you don't, you have two main choices, whether you work as a sole trader or a limited company. There's also another one, which is partnerships, but I'm not going to cover those because they're much more rare, to be honest. There's very few people that work in a partnership arrangement, but just be aware of the fact that that does exist as well. So if you're thinking about going to partnership with somebody else, then you need to go and do your research about the legal structure of having a partnership. You can still go into partnership with somebody else and run it as a limited company, but you may choose to run it as a partnership. But that's all I'm going to say about that. So sole trader or limited company is usually the two choices that people are looking at. In terms of a sole trade, and either way, you need to register with HMRC. If you're watching this and you're in the UK, you need to go on, register, and just indicate which one you're going to choose to work within. So, in terms of a sole trader, the pros and cons of deciding to go down that particular route is that it's relatively easy, it's simple, there's a lot less sort of statutory legal requirements on you as a sole trader. You can just pretty much go on, answer a couple of questions, and you can just go and start working, trading as a sole trader. It's easy. On the face of it, that's quite appealing. You don't need to provide annual accounts. The key sort of negative element to a certain extent is that there's much less legal protection. So there's the concept of personal liability if anything does go wrong. And that's why a lot of people choose to work as a limited company instead, because as a limited company, you're not personally liable. So if things go badly wrong and you end up on the wrong side of legal action, it's not you that they're taking it against, it's the company. So there's that distance between you and your business, which you don't have as a sole trader. The other thing about about working as a limited company to bear in mind, I would say the majority of freelance HR consultants do choose to work as with a business that's a limited company as opposed to as a sole trader. A lot of this is around, it's just if you're working with bigger companies, that's what they expect. They won't work with sole traders. They'll only work with limited companies. If you're working with the public sector, again, it's the same sort of arrangement. So that's something to bear in mind when you're making this decision. Who are you intending to work with? What sort of clients are you intending to work with? What sort of work are you intending to do? If you do decide that you're going to work as a limited company, you do need to go and get some proper professional advice usually from an accountant, because you'll have to do things like, you'll have to set up as a director and pay dividends to yourself and anybody else that's a director of your company. There's sort of legal implications to it. There are financial implications to it. You have to produce end of year accounts. There are profit lossings. Trust me, you're not going to be able to Google your way through this. So if you're choosing a limited company, which like I say, most HR consultants usually do, then go speak to an accountant. Usually you'll get the first sort of initial session will be free of charge. It's well worth getting some proper advice and making sure you get it set up properly. You can move between the two. If you set up as a sole trader initially, you can transfer over to being a limited company at a later date. And that is all I'm going to say about that, because I am no legal professional. I know sort of, I know what I know, and I just want to sort of raise it with you and just give you an indication of the various different options that you need to think about. So moving on from that, the other thing to look at is the type of business you're going to have. How are you going to work? How are you going to structure the way that you work? A lot of people don't really think about this when they start. They just think, well, I'll just, go and see what's out there and figure out what people need, and then I'll just do it. But there are distinct business models that you can choose, and it's worth, I think, knowing and understanding what they are. So what I want to do today is just to quickly run through the 4 main business models that people can use. And this isn't like a formal thing. You don't have to go out there and say, this is the way that I work. But usually your work will fall into 1 or sometimes 2 or 3 of these categories. So it's useful, I think, at this point, particularly if it is early days for you, to understand that, because otherwise you come up against it later on. So let's just go through these 4 quite quickly. The first one is interim work. Now, interim work is often referred to as contracting. So that is where you will usually work on a short-term basis. It could be a couple of months, it can be a year, maybe a little bit longer, but you're still self-employed, but you're offering your services to a particular client, working usually on the premises with them, working under their banner, presenting yourself to the clients as an employee. A lot of customers wouldn't necessarily know the difference between you working as a contractor and you working as an employee, but it's a short-term situation. There are all sorts of kind of current changes going on at the moment as I'm making this video in terms of what's called IR35, which you'll certainly start to hear about if you're intending to work as a contractor. The scope of IR35 is being massively extended. I am absolutely not going to go into it on this video because I don't really understand it myself, and it's quite complicated. But just to be aware of it and to go out and research it and make sure that you understand the implications of IR35, because it's having a big impact on the interim world. So the benefits of interim work is that it's fairly consistent. It's the closest model to actually being an employee. It feels very similar to being an employee. You don't get things like holiday pay and sick pay. You usually get paid more than you would do under a salary because of that, and it's that sort of consistent level of income. But it's not particularly flexible if you're going into self-employment for the flexibility and to be able to manage your own time. Interim work is not necessarily going to give you that, but it will give you the sort of reassurance of usually continuing with regular payments, regular salary. You'll usually get this kind of work through specialized agencies. Okay, so that's the interim business model. The next one is associate work. An associate arrangement is where you will be self-employed, but you will usually get your work via it being subcontracted to you by usually another consultant or a consultancy firm. So you do the work, but your relationship is with the other consultancy firm as opposed to with the end client. So the client has a relationship with the other consultancy business in the work. Some of the work gets subcontracted, out to you on their behalf. You'll usually work under the umbrella of the let's call them the main consultancy firm or consultant. You'll usually work under their umbrella. You'll maybe use an email address they've set up for you that's attached to their business. You will, to all intents and purposes, be working for that consultancy firm as far as the end client is concerned. The pros and cons of that is that you don't have to go out and find the work for yourself, which is why a lot of consultants like the idea of this when they first hear about it, because it sounds quite appealing. You can just get on with doing the HR work and you don't have to actually go out and do the marketing bit. So that sounds brilliant, doesn't it? There are some cons to it as well, though. It can be inconsistent. There's no guarantee that the work will come through necessarily. You will usually get paid less for it because you're being paid by the firm that you're being an associate of. They will obviously have the financial arrangement, the commercial relationship with the client. what you get paid for with your work is going to be less than if you had that direct commercial relationship yourself. But it's a perfectly valid business model, and lots of people do use it. So it's a good one to be aware of. The third one is project consultancy work, and this is the kind of ad hoc, short-term, solve a problem type situation, where you'll go in, you maybe not necessarily have worked with that client before, there'll be a particular problem, there'll be what I call trigger issues, so something that's happened that they need to get an extra resource to deal with. So usually there'll be a particular trigger issue that starts it off, then there'll be a project brief where they talk to you about what it is they need, providing it might be a 2P project, it might be a particular investigation that he's carrying out, it might be a mediation project, there's all sorts of things it could be. But there'll be a project brief, so they'll say to you, well, this is what we need, and you get the opportunity to ask questions about what's actually involved in it. Then you go away, put a proposal together, put a quote together, deliver that quote to the prospective client, they hopefully accept it, then you set out your terms, or sign all the contracts, and then you deliver the piece of work. There's a beginning and an end. Yeah, that's project-based consultancy work. Okay, that's the kind of bread and butter of the consultancy world, really. The fourth model to be aware of is what's called retainer work. So this is where you have a longer-term relationship with a couple of clients. You can work with a number of different clients. It doesn't have to be. It wouldn't usually be just one, because then you start getting back into the IR35 problems. So a retainer model is where you have a longer-term relationship with a client who pays you a certain amount, usually monthly, to provide outsourced ongoing HR services for them. Now, this is for many consultants, this is kind of the most desirable way of working. This is what most consultants are looking for obvious reasons. It gives you some stability, it gives you some consistency of income. You get the opportunity to build that longer term relationship. You get the opportunity to work strategically. So, there are lots of pros to working with people on a retainer basis. The difficulty is that they're not always easy to find initially. Most businesses are not necessarily out there looking for somebody to provide retainer services to them. So usually the way that it will work is that there'll be a project piece of work first. So something will happen, the business will realize that they don't have adequate support in place. They'll get somebody in, you hopefully, to do the initial piece of work, and then from that initial piece of work and that initial relationship, there may well then be an opportunity to sell them into a retainer arrangement off the back of it, because they don't want to get back into another problem situation such as the one they got into in the first place. Okay, now in terms of how those work, people can move between sort of the 2, 3, and 4. You can work in a mix of different ways. You can have some associate work, you can have some project work, you can maybe have 1 or 2 retainers. You can choose which one you particularly want to work with. So you can move between them, but usually it's a good idea to have some idea for yourself which is the one you'd ideally like to do, which is the business model that really appeals to you, and work towards getting those into place. So if you want to do associate work, you need to be building up those relationships. If you prefer the sort of flexibility of project work, then it's thinking about, well, where are those projects going to come from? If you want to do retainer work, then you think about how many would you want to do, what kind of retainer. I'll probably do another video at a later date about the different kind of retainers that you can do. Otherwise, this is going to get a bit long. But what kind of retainer work do you want to do, and how many clients ideally you're looking for? Now, interim work sort of stands a little bit alone. If you're working as an interim or a contractor, you won't usually do the other ones as well. Quite often people will try. They'll say, well, I'll do 3 days a week, and then I'll do my project work in the other 2 days. By and large, I've never really seen this work. It's your consultancy work gets parked, and all of your focus tends to be on the interim work that you're doing. So usually that first one you wouldn't do a mix of the other ones as well, but you can mix up associate work, project work, and retainer work if you want to. But ideally, have a plan, decide which way you want to work, and move towards bringing in those kind of clients. And that's it from me today. That's all I wanted to talk to you about. Just a quick run through some of those things that you need to decide, because being a business owner is all about making decisions. You know, there's no point going out and saying, well, I'll just see what's out there and I'll figure it out as I go, because you have to decide. You're the owner of your business. You are the person that decides how you want to work. You are the person that decides how you're offering your services. So you need to be making those decisions. Otherwise, your clients are making them for you, and that's not the right way around. That's, if you want to get in touch with me, I would love you to. I'd love to know what you think of these videos. If you've got any questions, anything you want me to cover, that would be fantastic. The easiest ways to get in touch with me are to connect with me on LinkedIn. That's my LinkedIn address there. To come and join the HR Freelancers group on Facebook, if you're not already a member, or just drop me an email. And that's it from me today. And I will see you on the next episode.